Welcome to the Common Humanity Peace Channel. My name is Mel Lehman, and here in my studio is a visual presentation of what we're trying to do. Our name, Common Humanity, seeks to help people understand different parts of the world. And behind me in my studio is an Amish Mennonite quilt, which my sister made for me, dear sister, Loretta. That's my American heritage. And then the other part of the screen are paintings from around the world. Today, we're taking an even further journey from the Middle East. We're going all the way to Korea. And we have a distinguished guest, Heng-Gil Han, who's going to be telling about his work in North Korea. I'm also very fortunate to have with us a distinguished guest and personal friend named Doug Hofstetter, who's a longtime peacemaker and traveler, and he's been to North Korea. Without further ado, the best person to introduce our distinguished artist guest is my dear friend, Doug Hofstetter. So Doug, over to you, and how about introduction?
Thank you. Heng-Gil and I have been working together for the last 6 years. Heng-Gil Han is a South Korean American who is the founding director of the Korean Art Forum, a nonprofit art organization in New York City. Han curates international exhibits exploring North Korea in the context of contemporary art. He served as the curator of the 2008 Busan Sculpture Project, 2009 and 2011 Incheon Women's Artists Biennials, all in South Korea, as well as being the curator of the Jamaica Arts Center for the Arts and Learning in Queens, New York. He curated the site-specific and social practice art triennial Jamaica Flux, Workspaces and Windows in 2004. He is the only Korean American curator who was ever invited to travel to North Korea to meet with museum directors and North Korean artists and visit to their studios. Han has received a curatorial fellowship from the Asia Cultural Council in New York for research on Korean art in 2017, the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts grant in 2015 for travel to North Korea for research purposes, and a grant from the Arts Council Korea in 2012 for research in the relationship between art and the Korean division. Heng-Gil Han is an activist and a peacemaker and a close friend. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you very much, Doug. Mel, would you?
Great to have you with us.
Thank you. So, go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, I think our first step would be to, after we've had that great introduction from our mutual friend Doug, is to go ahead and take a look at some of the paintings. I think if you try that screen share step again, and let's get right into the art and talk about some of the history and some of your experiences. But let's start looking at some great images, which is indeed what your images are. So let's go to the slideshow, and we can talk about the art as we go and your experience. And Doug can help us out on that.
All right, so I'll share my screen. Okay, do you see the images?
Yes.
Okay, so back in 2016, I invited 3 North Korean artists to New York, 1 Chinese artist to New York, and 1 Korean American artist who is in New York. So I invited 5 artists, and I planned to to work together, making art in Central Park or in different landmark areas of New York City. And that was approved both parties by the United States and North Korea. And then the timeline was in July or August 2017. And I worked on the visa of North Korean artists and then Chinese artists for them to come or be able to visit New York City. And it's about happen. So I went to Beijing to welcome North Korean artists and then to bring Chinese artists and North Korean artists together to New York City. Now they couldn't come because of the tension that was escalating at that time in, between United States and North Korea. And then the visa for the North Korean artists was denied, while the visa for the Chinese artists was approved. So we suppose we were planning, we were supposed to get on the plane like August 6th or August 5th, early August, So Chinese artist got on the plane as planned because he's received his visa, while North Korean artists couldn't get the visa, so we had to wait for the reconsideration of the visa approval. So the backup plan activated at that time. We had a backup plan, of course, and then we communicated through internet, and then the Chinese artist Shen Yang, he went Central Park and Metropolitan Museum, all these landmark places as planned, and then as well as the South Korean artist Zen went different part. But then, she also flied out to London at that time, short after the project, and then at Athens. So she took other pictures. She took pictures of the other cities. So what we did is we go similar places. We're supposed to go to the same place together, but then since we couldn't do that, so we went to similar places and then took the pictures. So while Shenyang went to Metropolitan Museum, we went to Beijing City Museum, or the National Museum of the Beijing City, which is equivalent with or to the Metropolitan Museum. So we took the pictures of the same and similar conditions. So these are the outputs of the pictures. We took thousands of pictures. The whole project lasted for like 2 weeks, and North Korean artists, you see the 3 panels in the middle, that's the North Korean artists' pictures, and then we traveled Beijing City, around the Beijing City, like 5 days or 10 days, and then let's go to the next picture. Oh, okay, it doesn't go here. This is Shenyang, took pictures of Metropolitan City, all the paintings. This is, I think, let's see who that is. Kim Myung-young, I think. Myung-young from North Korea took Beijing, the Museum of the Beijing City, and then some other places of the Beijing cities. And that's another North Korean artist. Same pictures of the same places. And then that's Hong Myung-gwang, Hong Song-gwang. Yeah. He's a very, very brilliant artist, and he took the pictures. You see these 2 pictures. Normally when you go to a museum, you see artworks and then you take pictures of artworks. He didn't. He took the pictures of the public, pictures of the people looking at the art. So he is quite different. And then Zaun, South Korean American artist who took the pictures of a landmark of the London city and then Athens. And then this is, the very first picture is the design, in design program, we were planning out, we will print out this way. And then this picture is the physical output, we print it out. And then we showed it at the Conrad Grebel University Gallery, and then these are installation pictures. And then we took one picture, we chose one pictures from each artist, and then, you know, printed it out and then showed it together. And then the very last painting here, this one, let me move. This one is, this pictures is, you know, different pictures from each artist and put them together, combine it together, how it would look when they are combined. You know, this panel shows 5 panels. You know, Zaun, and then Myungyoung Kim, and then Kim Myung-won, Kim Young, and Hong Sung-kwang, and then Shenyang. So these panels have designated or allocated to each artist, and then it only shows, each panel only shows pictures of by one artist.
And if I could interrupt, which is the South Korean artist, and which
This is South Korean artist.
the first one?
Left, the bluish one,
Right.
and then the very far right, the it doesn't show. It's rather very blackish, but it's very goldish. That's Chinese artist, and then the middle is the middle 3 panels are by 3 North Korean artists.
Now, from where I sit, I could venture a very simple point of the common humanity of all these people. I can't see the details, but somehow they all seem to be together. Is that part of the message of the picture?
Yeah, they all seem to be together, as well as they all seem to be diverse at the same time. There is a common theme going on, common subject matter going on, but then all different ideas based on time and place at that moment and at the place. You know, these basically are, you know, these pictures, these 3 pictures, they are 3 North Korean, they are by 3 North Korean artists at the same time, at the same place, but then slightly different angles by default positions. Like, you know, you cannot be exactly the same position. 2 people cannot be the same position, you know, even they are in the same place, their positions are different. So there is commonality and then there is a diversity, and that's what the project is about. You know, how, you know, photography inherently has this focal point, and then that shows the intention, the hidden, not hidden, but then, you know, unrevealed intention of the artist, what they are thinking, which cannot be verbally expressed. Or you can, but then it takes a lot of time to express that in language. So that's the point. You will see down there further. So I'll just continue showing the installations of the exhibition at the Conrad Graber University. A beautiful, beautiful gallery space, and then really brilliant. Thank you, Doug. You know, Doug has introduced the gallery to me, or introduced me to the gallery director, and then it worked out. And then that's a really successful show, because it leads, you know, it initiated the show tour to South Korea, to Incheon, and then come back to New York. So they cut the, you know, the start line. You know, this is a South Korean artist talking about candle revolution back in 2016. And then this is Hong Sung-kwang, and then French artist. And then they are showing the face or portraits, but then multiple portraits and then single individual portraits. Now, this is another picture. Now, this is where it comes down. Look at this mountain. This is Mount Baekdu in North Korea, the secret mount that, you know, has a lot of stories. People are talking about, you know, many mythical stories about the mount. And then it's believed to be the birthplace of the Korean nation. And then 3 North Korean artists are or have painted the same mount from a same perspective, same mount in the same position and in the same perspective, right? Now, when you put them together here, these 3 paintings shows very different feel, and although they are same mount, same face, but then they are interpreted differently. So there is individuality. And then, when I met the 3 North Korean artists in Beijing, we have this bias that, North Korean art doesn't care about the individuality and characteristic or individual characters. And then they said, that's not true. We do pay attention to individuality, creativity. And, that's one thing that we have to change ourselves because, we think North Korean art is political propaganda and then everything is the same. And then I'm proving here, no, they went to the same place and then they painted the same subject matter in the same position, in the same perspective. Look at by yourself. They brought up different textile, they brought up different technique, they brought up different creativity, their individual creativity. And then if anyone argues about me, North Korean artists do not have creativity, then they must be blind by looking at these pictures. That's my argument. That's my project is about. North Koreans are not robots. They are not machines. They are humans. So we have due to respect their humanity. They are people and they are persons. They are not, machinery guns.
Right, exactly.
Operated by Kim Jong-un only. No, it doesn't work like that. And then I actually discussed about that with the North Korean diplomats and then other people, the North Korean artists. And then, one of the diplomats told me, we have this belief that North Korea is a very severely surveilled society. So citizens cannot do whatever they can do. They are always controlled by the government. And then the diplomat laughed at me. Do you know how much it takes to surveil people like that? We do not have economic capacity to do so. The way the Americans are telling, or American media is telling to us, surveilling a person takes huge amount of money. And we simply do not have that kind of money. And then, he doesn't understand why people believe that by looking at the economic conditions, there is no resources to do like that, Americans can do that because America has such a money, such a big money, so they can do that. China can do that. Perhaps South Korea can do that. But in North Korea, it's just impossible to do it because they do have their own technology, but then they cannot impose it the way we talk about them or we tell about them. Yeah. So you see the different characteristics here, and then the middle painting, this is very significant because, it has resonance, or it resonates the American minimalist or American landscape. The far left, that resonates the Chinese landscape. And then the far right resonates the Korean aesthetic sensibility. So there is certain things going on, and it's a very interesting future. Hong Song-gang, who traveled to Tibet all alone and backpacking journey, and then he took these pictures and he made these portraits to sell it for $5-10 and then to continue his journey. Doug, do you have anything to say in this about this picture?
This is one of the artists that we had hoped to bring to New York. Unfortunately, because of the State Department, he was not able to do any painting in Central Park, but he did travel by himself to Tibet and did this beautiful painting of a Tibetan person there. And as Heng-Gil pointed out, because he didn't have much money, that's partly how he supported himself traveling through Tibet for about a month by selling portraits of people that he was kind of doing as he traveled.
Yeah. So, as I said before, the show at the Conrad Grebel Gallery has traveled to South Korea, Incheon in South Korea, and this is an installation picture of the Incheon exhibition. When I travel the show, I don't just travel the show. I do not just pick up the show and then put it up in another city. No, I'm adding other artists and I'm taking out other artists. All depends on context and the site. So new artists came in, and then old artists edited out sometimes. Yeah, and then this is another picture of the show. Another picture, another one. You see the three paintings, put them together next to one another to make sure that people understand that, North Koreans are not just brainwashed. Perhaps we are brainwashed too, on both bodies, who knows, these are Chinese artist performance, and then this is another installation of the same work, and I always combine them together because I liked how the content was translated. Although it's the same subject matter, but then the content is so different based on their culture and then situation and all these things. And then this is a poster that Nick actually contributed to the show. This is a poster owned by Nick Bonner in Beijing, and it is made right after the summit in 2018, summit between Kim and Moon, and then it says unification train is running.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you could just open this up a little bit. The two names you mentioned are who are the?
Kim Jong-un, the summit of the President Moon of South Korea, and then the chairman of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. It happened April 19th. It happened April 19th, 2018 at the Panmunjom. And the poster is celebrating the summit between the head of states of North Korea and South Korea. And then the writing here, it says unification train is running. So the train for the unification is running. And that's at the beginning of the show, up front of the show. Now I am stopped. I think I have another one. Let me see whether I can. I'll stop here, share. I'll stop the share and then I'm back here. Okay, so do you have any comment or anything to say? We have like 2 minutes left, actually.
Yeah, well, we are going to be asking our audience to send in some questions. We like to have some interaction with our guests. So any of you participants out there, you'll see a Q&A at the bottom. I see 2 questions already, but while they're sending them in, thank you for those really very moving images, Heng-Gil. And we ask all of our guests in this program, it's a tradition we're developing, one very simple question. what can each of us do for peace? It's a very, very broad general question, so forgive me for that. But what can each of us do for peace? Our attitudes, our actions, what is something you would suggest that we do for peace?
For me, cultural exchange is very important. That's why I'm doing that. And then, United States prohibit, or United States is very prohibitive, doing the cultural exchange. And then I think that's wrong strategies right now going on. Tourism is banned, and then any cultural interactions is banned. I think the State Department has to strongly reconsider, reopening the cultural exchanges. What's wrong, having the allowing artists coming to New York City and then have them express their opinions. Of course, they will say bad things about America, but that's not so bad. Listening to others, right? As
Right.
well, we say bad things about North Korea. So you know, discussions and cultural exchange is really important. I think without that, how can you understand the other?
And when we spoke yesterday, we spoke about a memory that your family had of an interchange with Americans. Would you feel comfortable talking about that again today? I was so touched by that. I think we in the States, we only see the headlines and a couple of images of Korea, North and South Korea. And you were telling us just a wonderful story yesterday that I thought was so illuminating. Would you feel comfortable sharing that memory again today?
Yeah. I think there was 2 points. My mom, I didn't experience the Korean War, so I do not know much. But then, in the 60s, like we have been receiving American aid all the time up to like 72, I believe. And then when I was kids, very young, like 4 or 5 years old, we didn't have much to eat. So I had to go out and then stand in line to get this cornbread and then dried milk, piece of milk. And then, you put it in the hot water, then it becomes milk. Wonderful, magical thing, magical stuff that you want to always get. So every day I went out and then stand in line and then get the cornbread and then a piece of milk, or dried piece of milk and home. And my mom always told me, watch out, be careful how, she was very fearful about American soldiers because of how suddenly, this friendly, generous gesture and hand can become, like, able hand. You cannot even express what can you do. So the way she experienced the war was that, she, we lived in Incheon. I'm from Incheon, where the Incheon landing happened in 1950. And her experience was that two things she always told me. One is when bombs fell, you don't go away from the bomb. You run to the bomb because no bombs fell exactly the same place twice. So, when the bomb fell, then when you see the bombs are falling, then you run into the bomb and just wait until it explodes, and then you get into the hole, in the earth, the pit, earth pit, then you're saved. When you run away from the bomb, then you will get hit by another bomb. Now, the second thing that she told me is it was such the air bombing of America was such a horrible thing because it looked like, you are looking at this
Locust. Yeah.
flying into your land, Incheon is right at the border of the seashore, and then you see the wide open sky. And when you look at, the whole herd of the plane is coming, it's like a mucus herd and coming into you, And then they bombed it in the morning, lunch, and evening, 3 times a day. and then, everything is just destroyed, totally, knocked out. So that's what she remembers, and that fear went very long time, perhaps for her entire life, So whenever she sees American soldiers, it was friendly, it was very generous, and it was nothing, fighting or, strange or nothing alienating, anything. But then she always had this fear inside of her, okay, you have to be careful. You just have to be careful and then, watch out what's going on. And then that actually is somewhat very similar to what North Korea is saying right now. Generosity is good, but then they always have these things on their back head, back of their mind, okay, that trauma and the wound. And then we have to heal that wound somehow. It's such a deep memory, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing this art and helping us to heal those wounds. I think we in the States don't see the complexity of our relationships with other countries, and you've helped us a great deal today to do that. My friend Carla has written a question, which is really a comment to say how much she appreciated your art and to thank you for coming. Thank you, Carla, for being our viewer, and thank you, Heng-Gil, for your wonderful art. Doug, we mentioned a website that we might direct people to who want more information.
Yes, Heng-Gil and I have been working together for the last 6 years in an organization called the Korean Art Forum. And if you go on the web, KAFNY, Korean Art Forum, New York, .org, you will find digital copies of the 6 or 7 exhibits that we have done in and around New York City and in Canada and in South Korea. There will also be some of the publications that we have done. It's actually a very extensive resource, KAFNY.org. And it is a very, very good resource. The one question that I might ask of Heng-Gil before we leave is, how old were you when you came to the United States and why did you come? And the follow-up question would be, I'm sure you grew up with lots of the stereotypes about North Korea. What caused you to want to dig deeper beyond the stereotypes, to get deeper into an understanding of the North Korean people and their art?
Yes, I have been brainwashed too. I had a lot of biases about North Korea. Literally when I went to North Korea, I was thinking about their face must have been red. And they're looking, it was a very strange feeling, because I have been hearing all the time, red, evil, and then, you have horns in front of your forehead, and when I went to Pyongyang, I saw the people the same as me, look like as me, and then, it was such a strange feeling, what I've heard and what I am actually seeing. That's one anecdote. And why I came, I came to United States from a mixed, basket of, things, failure, success, vision and freedom. The only thing I can tell is, I'm staying in New York City because New York City is the only city that accepted me. Seoul didn't accept me, and I lived in various cities around the world, and no cities accepted me the way as I am, And it's a horrible feeling, actually. Since, I sometimes go to Korea, South Korea now still, but then I always felt they do not really accept me. I was refused all the time. And then I do have an open mind, I'm not so, biased. I try not to be biased and have an open mind all the time. And still, like last year, 2019 or 2018, I went to the Seoul or Incheon to show this show, to have these exhibitions. I felt, they still do not accept my ideas. Dealing with North Korea is so dangerous for them. And then they looked at me, they didn't say that, but then I told me I must be crazy to go to Pyongyang or to talk to the North Koreans, and yeah. And then, in the 70s and 80s, Korea was a very closed society, you cannot talk about LGBT issues or women issues. And then also, still today, I'm working a lot of African-American artists, Black artists. And I worked in Jamaica, which is a Black community. And a lot of Korean people told me about that, how can you work there? That comment is a racist. And then I couldn't get along with that. That's why I left my country and I'm staying here. And then again, New York City is, even LA didn't accept me. I tried to LA or San Francisco, they couldn't see the value of diversity or open-mindedness, So things like that. And New York is the only place. Yes, that's why.
Well, as a fellow New Yorker, I'm so glad that you're here in my city. You are somewhere on the city of New York, and I'm up here in Upper Manhattan, and I hope we can have coffee one of these days and learn more about your art. I'm noticing the clock is ticking. We're past the half-hour mark and pushing to the 45-minute mark. Any final comments by Doug or by you before we wrap things up? We're so grateful that you're here. This wonderful opens up this a whole new understanding for us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm currently working on the Korean War. And then we are collecting a lot of materials about the Korean War, materials from veterans and the materials from adoptee artists or people who are adopted here, stories, pictures, drawings, memory, what they call it, is trinkets or whatever it is. We are collecting a lot of them, and to have a show later on in 2022 or 2023, I don't know yet. But then, I'll get back to you about that. But then, we are trying to make something out of Korean War.
And Doug, any comments you would have to wrap things up?
No, I think Heng-Gil has done a very good job, and I'm pleased that I could bring two of my friends together in the community that is struggling to build a common humanity and to use the arts to build understanding between civilizations, between peoples, and between language systems.
Thank you so much, our distinguished guest, Mr. Heng-Gil Han, and also our distinguished guest, Doug Hostetter, for being with us today and talking about peace on the Common Humanity Peace Channel.